On August 29, 1992, WWE presented Summerslam from Wembley Stadium. With a live attendance of just over 80,000 fans, this is, at the time of writing, the largest non-WrestleMania crowd the company ever had, and the 5th overall. In October 1989, WWE promoted their first ever event in the UK at the London Arena. The show was called UK Rampage, and it aired live on Sky TV, which became an annual event for a few years. In the first one, the main event was Hulk Hogan vs Randy Savage. That match is a part of the WWE Network's recent compilation of some of the best UK matches ever. From here, WWE gained in popularity over the years, so much so that SummerSlam, which had originally been planned to come from Washington DC, was moved not just to England, but the giant Wembley Stadium, whose maximum capacity was 82,000. In a rare change of the format, the main event would feature the Intercontinental Championship, as the English-born Davey Boy Smith would challenge the champion Bret Hart, but I'll talk more about that match later. In the semi-main event, WWF champion Randy Savage defended his title against the Ultimate Warrior. This was a rematch from their epic clash at WrestleMania 7, but wouldn't come close to stealing the show as they did with the first match, thanks in part to the convoluted story going in. At WrestleMania 8, Randy Savage had won the WWE Championship for the second time, defeating Ric Flair. The Nature Boy's strategy going into the match was to play mind games with Savage, presenting fake photographs of himself chilling poolside with Savage's wife, Elizabeth. Flair promised that once he won at WrestleMania, he would reveal more pictures of Liz, but Savage put a stop to that by dethroning him. Going into SummerSlam, Flair and his cohort Mr. Perfect weren't done with the mind games. Over the weeks leading up to SummerSlam, Flair claimed that either Savage or Warrior had hired the services of Mr. Perfect to interfere in the match in their favour, but wouldn't reveal which man. He claimed we would find out at SummerSlam, but both men denied brokering any kind of deal. This served to create more tension between Savage and Warrior, as both believed the other had hired Curt Hennig, when in truth neither had, and Flair was turning them against each other. He was doing it out of jealousy for not being announced the #1 contender himself. In a pre-match interview with Gene Okerlund, Flair again refused to say whose side Mr. Perfect would be on. What followed was a 28-minute clash not quite as good as their WrestleMania epic. Near the end, Warrior hits his press slam and goes to hit his finishing splash off the ropes, when Flair hits him in the back with a chair, which Savage doesn't see. All he sees when he gets to his feet is Warrior down on the mat. Savage climbs the ropes to go for his elbow drop, but instead decides to leap towards Flair, who clips him in the knee with a chair on the way down. Savage fails to beat the 10 count, and therefore loses the match, but not the title. But in the process it became clear that Flair and Perfect were on the side of neither man. Flair attempts to finish Savage, but Warrior comes back in and runs him and Mr. Perfect off. He then presents Macho Man with his championship, and helps him up to his feet as the two heroes show each other respect. Elsewhere on this show, Shawn Michaels and Rick Martel fought in a match with a unique stipulation. Both men were fighting over the affection of Sensational Sherry, who demanded that in the match, neither could hit the other in the face. The reason for this is that the model and the Heartbreak Kid both prided themselves on their good looks, and therefore neither man could alter the facial features of the other. The match ended in a double count out, with both men fighting over being the one to carry a lifeless Sherry to the back. Let me explain that for a minute. After about 8 minutes, both men slap each other in the face, and to prevent any more of this, Sherry, who is standing on the apron, fakes fainting, and both men rush to her aid, taking turns in carrying her up the long Wembley walkway. One hilarious detail is that when Martel carries Sherry, he holds her in a respectful manner, whereas when it's Shawn's turn, he throws her over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes. Shawn and Sherry had been paired together in February of 1992. The dynamic between them was always that Sherry loved Shawn, but Shawn only really loved Shawn. It was the early version of the Heartbreak Kid persona that he would come to perfect throughout the 90s, following his split with Marty Jannetty. The iconic theme music Shawn Michaels has used to this day has long had his own voice performing the vocals, but the original version, composed by Jimmy Hart, has the same lyrics but with Sherry's voice. This was played on years later when Kurt Angle was taunting Michaels pre-WrestleMania 21, when he invited Sherry back to perform the now legendary parody known as Sexy Kurt. Shawn has said in many interviews and his autobiography that he was hesitant about being put with Sherry, but often praises her for the effect she had on his career at the time. In a strangely placed match between the WWE Championship and the main event, The Undertaker defeated Kamala in a 3-minute match. The reason this is notable is that if you've ever seen the clip of Undertaker arriving into an arena on the back of a hearse, it's likely from this night. Being an open-air show in the summer, the venue looked very different as the evening progressed, being daylight at the start and dark once the night sets in. This is likely why this match occurs so late in the card, as Taker's entrance might have looked strange in broad daylight. The Undertaker at this point was only a couple of years into his legendary WWE run, and now along with his manager Paul Bearer was quickly becoming one of the most popular stars, despite entering as a feared villain. Given the length of the enormous entrance walkway and the trademark slowness of The Undertaker's entrance, I'm glad they thought of him riding on the back of a hearse, as if he'd walked to the ring he might not have made it by WrestleMania 9. Undertaker made short work of the Ugandan giant, before moving on to his famously terrible feud with Giant Gonzalez. Given what we know now, I wonder if Undertaker wishes this Kamala feud lasted a few months longer. I'd be remiss if at some point I didn't mention the opening video for this event, in which fans were asked to read lines about wrestlers on the show, in their British accents. One young fan said that the British Bulldog is gonna win, whether he wants to or not. Had social media been a thing at the time, this would likely have gone viral. In 2020, 28 years later, the kid in the clip was found. I won't identify her in case I shouldn't, but in an interview she described that day as one of the best in her life, so hopefully she sees the funny side of that clip being remembered. By 1992, the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith had become a popular fixture on WWE's mid-card as a solo act, following the split from his tag team partner, the Dynamite Kid. He had also become a main eventer on WWE's UK events, winning the Battle Royal at the Albert Hall in 1991 and defeating IRS to close out another UK rampage earlier in 92. This time, Bulldog would face his biggest test yet, challenging the IC champion and his own brother-in-law, Bret Hart. By this time, Bret Hart was enjoying a lengthy second reign as Intercontinental Champion. He had held the title almost continuously since August of the previous year, losing it to the Mountie due to illness in January, then winning it back from Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 8. It would soon be time for Bret to ascend from the Workhorse title, however, as in October of 92, he would defeat Ric Flair for his first of 5 World Championships. There was just the matter of Bret having to drop the IC title first, so he did the honours for the British Bulldog in front of his fellow countrymen. I mentioned before that Bret and Bulldog were brothers-in-law. That's because at the time, Davey was married to Diana Hart-Smith, Bret's sister. Right before the match, Diana is interviewed by Sean Mooney in the crowd, and is given the lofty task of selling the drama of the match, as she represented a division in the family that this match had created. Throughout the match, there were camera cuts to Diana sitting in the crowd watching, as a reminder that we were seeing family members battling over a prestigious prize. After the match, Diana enters the ring and celebrates with both men, who shake hands, as a way of closing the story with the family back together. This was of course just a storyline to build up the drama of the match, but more Harts would become involved later, when Bret feuded with his brother Owen. The Bulldog enters first to his trademark Rule Britannia music, led by London-born boxing champion Lennox Lewis. Across the crowd are Union Jacks and signs of support for the Bulldog. While there were boos upon the champion's arrival, Bret had his share of fans too. In the later years of Bret's WWE career, the idea of him being a hero in Canada and a villain in the US was based on how popular Bret was not just in Canada, but everywhere else WWE went internationally, especially the UK. This was also the given reason why Bret was chosen to defeat Ric Flair for the title later in '92. By the time the opening bell rings, this Intercontinental title main event has a special big fight feel. One of the more memorable moments in this 25-minute main event was Bret Hart applying the sharpshooter from his back. Both men are laying on the mat when Bret starts to configure their legs into position. He then rolls over and manages to stand up, locking Bulldog in the hold. Bret might have done this in other matches, but I don't remember ever seeing it another time, and the crowd reaction is amazing when Bret manages to complete the hold. Following Bulldog making it to the ropes to break the sharpshooter, Bret makes a critical mistake. He hits the ropes and attempts a sunset flip, only for Bulldog to catch him in a flash pin and win the championship as the crowd roars in approval. A flash pin is usually done to remind fans that a pinfall can occur at any time, and in this very evenly wrestled match, it was the perfect choice for a finish. I just can't imagine Bulldog winning decisively with his running power slam having the same explosive reaction from the crowd. Bulldog doesn't celebrate and his music doesn't play as Bret sits in the ring looking bitter. Bulldog offers a handshake, and Bret teases leaving before coming back and celebrating with the new champion and his sister. I might be a little biased having seen this match dozens of times over the years, but to me, this match is a classic. Despite mine and many other fans' warm memories of this match, Bret Hart himself has expressed a different opinion in various interviews. Speaking to Inside the Ropes, he recently claimed that by the time he got back to the locker room, most everyone had left to go to the hotel, and thus didn't see him and Davey steal the show. He has also on record stated that due to the abuse of certain substances, Bulldog had forgotten the entire plan for the match, so Bret had to lead him through it. There are brief moments where, knowing this, you can tell the Bulldog looks a little lost, but other than that, Bulldog doesn't seem to miss a step at all. Bret's WWE career is littered with esteemable performances, but this night might have been the British Bulldog's finest hour. Thank you for watching yet another wrestling channel. If you enjoyed this, please comment, like or subscribe.